And with me today is Joao. Nice to have you here, man.
Nice, man. Thanks for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here.
Perfect. So Joao is the founder of Mystic Finance. Could you tell us in a few words what Mystic is building?
Yeah, for sure. So Mystic is a lending market for tokenized real world assets, RWAs. So what we do is effectively making loans against assets that are being brought on chain. But
So far, guys, you have achieved a lot of success. And per the information that I have, you have achieved more than 120 million in deposits, more than 15,000 active users over the last 3 months. And I think it's a pretty great traction point for such a young industry subset such as RWA5. And before we dive into the whole market structure and tech details, I would like to ask you about the foundation. Why have you decided to launch Mystic on Plume, and what benefits does it give to your product?
yeah, for sure. Thanks in advance for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here and talk all things DeFi tokenization. It's the stuff that we work on every day. So yeah, for us, we're really bullish on the intersection of tokenization and DeFi. That's what we think is going to power the future of DeFi and on-chain activity for the next few years. We met Plume very early on when they were also starting out, and we loved their vision of building a blockchain dedicated to RWAs, tokenized assets. Plus, the problems we want to solve are very much along the lines of solving the blockers that prevent RWAs from being onboarded in DeFi. And so when they told us that that's what they were doing, we realized we would face the same problems along the way. And so it was kind of a no-brainer for us to work together.
Cool. I think that overall Plume ecosystem is expanding very quickly now. What are the opportunities and advantages you see what Plume is bringing compared to other RWA-focused chains or just overall chains?
Just to contextualize, because we haven't gone into that too much, but at Mystic, what we do is loans against RWAs, right? So what we do is have RWAs as collateral so people can take out loans against it. It's the primary use case of DeFi, in my opinion, just apply to tokenized assets. What we need to find is really our main partners, our issuers that tokenize assets naturally. So for us, Plume making an ecosystem specifically dedicated to this profile is attractive for us. And I guess what's more interesting for us is looking at Plume almost as a tokenization platform rather than a blockchain, right? It's a place where assets are tokenized and more tokenized assets will come on chain. And so for us, it's just a natural place to be to find these assets against which to make loans effectively. And that's since been the case for the issuers. Having this ecosystem is more interesting because you'll find more DeFi use cases where developers are interested in working with RWAs, and using this logic for every level of the stack, you kind of end up realizing that you end up with a more full stack solution where if you're an issuer, you'll find an ecosystem of DeFi projects to work with. If you're a compliance solution, you'll find issuers and DeFi projects to work with. And that's really what made this so interesting for us and still does, and why we like working with the guys so much. It's clearly a stronger ecosystem than if I were to work with just a tokenization platform. And yeah, just relationship wise or just vision wise, I like working into a lot. And I think what we're doing well is like it's RWAs the DeFi native way, right? It's RWAs for crypto, and it's not aiming at TradFi, if that makes sense, right? The target objective here is not to have a hedge fund deploys to have, I mean, obviously it is, right? But I mean, a Web2 asset manager that has never heard about crypto, at least for now. It's more so to give RWAs as an alternative vehicle for or yield exposure to Web3 native users.
I think the thing that you described building on Plume is basically an ecosystem of projects and issuers coming together. And I can agree more because I've been on a couple of events, as you know, in the Plume ecosystem, and I've seen a lot of cool protocols building great solutions. So I think Plume is extensively coming to prosperity with, I think, more than 200 protocols built already, which is super great. And thanks for that. I think for now we will zoom out to the overall RWA scene. As you know, a lot of things are happening. A lot of TradFi players, a lot of money markets funds are getting on chain now. So I'm really interested regarding your take on the whole industry development. And maybe what's the biggest challenges to bringing RWAs on chain?
I think it's like a great moment for tokenization. Honestly, I think you have a much more friendly regulation that helps this kind of thing happen with more ease. You have an increase in acceptance of crypto as a genuinely interesting asset class. And I think what that does altogether, it just starts getting a Web2 native user base more familiar with looking at crypto rails. And that as like just a mindset shift is very important. And that's been, yeah, I think I would say that for starters has been a huge step, because you have the mindset part and then you have the Rails part, right? And just from an infrastructure perspective, blockchain technology is clearly superior to traditional database-driven information management systems. And so it just makes assets more liquid. It doesn't have the normal opening hours limitation, trading hours limitation. I mean, it's obviously open 24/7, and it just improves efficiency and liquidity in that sense. And so I think you're seeing the Rails aspect be more and more recognized for the improvements it brings. And I think what you're also seeing is a combination of regulation, a combination of looking at the Rails as an important component or an interesting opportunity. You're also seeing people look at the Web3 native market as a market, right? Just as like there's users here, there's an opportunity here. And I think what we're seeing right now with the tokenization of money market funds, more and more projects trying to bring new, let's call it yield sources or yield alternatives on the blockchain, is an attempt to kind of bridge both worlds and bring this traditional yield or traditional asset classes to a Web3 native user base, not the other way around. And that works, right? And so, like if I'm to give a combination of all those things, I would say it's these three, right? The regulation, people being more interested in the Rails, people seeing that there is an interesting market to service here. And so you started having these proof of concepts by Web2 native institutions, for example, where they're tokenizing funds for distributing on on-chain markets, where they're tokenizing stuff, even for internal use, right? Or using blockchain to build products to work with their existing partners. This is in all sorts of ways, a combination of playing around with it to understand the ecosystem and understand the market, or for distribution purposes of existing products. So, yeah, I really think it's a very exciting time as you have this realization that, yeah, this works really well, and we're still so early, and you start seeing institutions come in. As if you've been in the space for a while, that was a moment in time we would all say the institutions are coming, or they will come one day. And it's really cool to see like that time is now.
Yeah, I really like that overview. I think that the important things that you mentioned is basically an intersection of liquidity and markets, and more importantly, the secondary markets, I think. And maybe the follow-up question here would be, what will allow us to finally get to this liquid secondary markets for RWAs? Because as we see, a lot of issuers are entering the space, but when it comes to these assets being fully tradable and liquid, I think there are still some barriers to overcome.
Yeah, so I mean, we first have to just realize that to contextualize these assets are intrinsically different than crypto, right? And I think we shouldn't have the same expectations that we have for crypto for them. I think the main difference is really threefold, right? One is that they're much more fragmented because you can have any number of people tokenizing the same asset class, right? Tokenization is not gated. And so you can have, like we currently have, a bunch of people tokenizing money market funds, like you mentioned, which ends up being a bunch of different versions. So that kind of thing, I think you're going to see a lot, right? For example, there can be an infinite number of people tokenizing Tesla stock, and that's going to lead to more fragmentation. I think you're going to see this kind of phenomenon. Although granted, that can happen in crypto on, for example, the LST scenario, but it's slightly different. And particularly the main difference is these assets are regulated, right? They're securities to the most frequently. Like when we talk about RWAs, I think it's a bit ethereal for people that are not in the market, but essentially we're usually talking about tokenized financial instruments, right? And tokenized financial assets. So they are securities at the end of the day, and they mandate KYC, they mandate they have eligibility requirements, such as only qualified accredited investors can access them. And so we need to respect these requirements, I guess, even when they are being traded on chain. It's an on-chain security, but it's a security nonetheless. And so I think the fragmentation, the regulation, I would maybe even mention the intrinsic liquidity, like an asset like private credit is intrinsically more liquid than something like an LST, to use my prior example, even though obviously T-bill is not, right? So there's a spectrum to this. But I guess if you're looking to compete with crypto yields, you are going to gravitate towards a more alternative asset type of instrument, and those will be more intrinsically illiquid, right? And so that will be an added difficulty to generate secondary market liquidity. So I guess if you're combining all of these, what you're going to end up with is an asset that moves very differently than crypto. That is again intrinsically more illiquid, which obviously will make it much more difficult to do OTC or secondary market transactions, like you mentioned. And particularly the regulation just is a huge barrier, right? And if in crypto we're used to a totally permissionless environment, and if that can't happen here, that's the difficulty, right? So that's kind of my take on the problem. Maybe 2 cents on the solution is you've seen a lot of people having one way or another innovation that enables these assets to move permissionlessly through all sorts of mechanisms. You have treasury bill backed yield-bearing stablecoins, more than one of them, for example, that can move permissionlessly. On Plume, using the Plume example, you have Nest Vault, a staking product that aggregates different RWA assets. So you have innovations that solve it. But other than that, I think we just have to walk towards a version of DeFi that is friendly to this and respects this. And we use the technology to the best of our abilities to increase the liquidity of these assets. But otherwise, there's an intrinsic level of difficulty that we face. That's just not a win, right? It's just characteristic. It's just intrinsic.
Absolutely valid. And just in connection to the innovations that you mentioned, that there are a lot of innovations here to tackle the problem of liquidity and like this imbalance that RWAs bridging from the traditional finance and physical world are intrinsically more liquid than the some of the crypto assets. I think at Mystic you're exactly solving some of the problems that you mentioned, and the features that I'm talking about is RFQ API 1 and structured vaults. Are they upcoming or they already implemented? And if you can elaborate on these features, it'll be amazing to understand how they function and what benefits they will bring.
Maybe I'll elaborate a bit first on the problem, and then maybe how they
Sure.
work or what they do. So again, we do loans against tokenized assets. That's our focus. And onboarding these more liquid assets on DeFi is where we're focused, right? That's the problem we're trying to solve effectively. And the form that takes in lending ends up being more so liquidations, right? First, we also have to respect the access requirements that we mentioned before. So the asset is more, if the asset's regulated or it has these requirements, we need to permission the pool so that we respect that, right? From not only us, but any other participant in the market. So that's definitely an important difference from regular traditional DeFi. But from a more practical standpoint, the main difficulty here is liquidations. So a lot of these assets, as we mentioned, represent an underlying financial instrument, an underlying trade. Sometimes, like if it's treasury bills, you still have to do at least a wrapper transaction to unwind it if you want to get liquidity back. What I meant there is if you need to unwind the trade, that will always take some time. And so what ends up happening with RWAs is that you always have a redemption mechanism, like what for the T-bills is trading it for cash, right? For redeeming the asset for stablecoins. And that is the intrinsic mechanism to get liquidity on these assets. And the more illiquid the asset is, the longer this redemption period will be. So if it is private credit, it might be, I have no idea, right? 30 days, 60, like this is just a speculation, obviously. If it is something more liquid, like a treasury bill, it will be 1 day, T plus 0, T plus 2, something like this. And the problem in lending is that DeFi requires instant liquidity to solve for bad debt and to solve for the liquidations problem, right? Otherwise, you can't unlock the collateral in the lending market, much like that is how existing lending markets function, right? And so what we're doing to solve that is precisely this RFQ API you mentioned. So RFQ, for those not familiar, is request for quote. So we're basically requesting various parties for a bid, and then we're choosing the best bid, and we're giving the bid the trade. Effectively, that's how it works. And the trade here is we're effectively asking them to bridge this T plus 1, T plus 2, T plus 0 in the case of T-bills, so that the asset can be instantly liquid in the case of a liquidation, so that system essentially of redemptions can speak to the system of liquidations that is again expecting instant liquidity, whereas redemptions definitely don't work like that. Is this, I would call it like last mile liquidity, right? Like this like small period of time where if there is no liquidity there, the two systems don't work, but you need to connect them, and you need to first of all advance the liquidity. So we basically work with market makers, OTD desks, liquid funds to help us bridge this liquidity, foundations, and basically onboard these assets into DeFi. And so a lot of the work we do in that sense is to connect people, right? Connect this asset issuer with this liquidity provider that can provide them with that small liquidity on that window. But that, even though it looks small, that makes the asset DeFi ready. That what makes it possible to be onboarded as collateral. And so that's what we're building in that sense. And that's our focus on Plume. And that's been in progress for the last 2-3 months and should be coming out over the next couple of weeks. So depending on when this podcast airs, it will be live already. We got liquidators, we got assets on the other side. So all the ingredients are there. We're just wrapping up tech and we'll be good to go. But I think that's really exciting, both for us and for the space, because that means this dream, almost, I would say, right, that we've always been talking about, or like using your assets in DeFi and like this seamless crossover between the real world and crypto is, I think this is a crucial piece in that personally, and we're very happy to be able to be contributing it. And in addition to this, what we're doing is a structured credit primitive, where effectively we tie vaults that act as junior tranches, and junior tranches here meaning first loss capital in the more traditional definition, to Morpho vaults. Everything we've done is built on top of Morpho, and effectively these vaults we're creating act as first loss capital to Morpho vaults and enable structured credit on Morpho, right? And so the second primitive, what it does is, if we don't have any liquidator on the RFQ front, then the junior trancher, this protection vault, if we can call it that, will suffer the loss, aka handle the liquidation in a certain way. And that enables even onboarding the assets that we can't find any liquidator for, or they're just crazy liquid, right? And you can't do anything about it. And then you just do this, right? And then the people on the safety vault or the junior tranche or this protection vault, they're getting a premium for the asset being illiquid, but the asset can be onboarded nonetheless.
Perfect. Thanks for elaborating on those features. And the structured vaults are also coming in the next few weeks.
Yeah, that one is a bit farther out. We think it's going to be a 2 months thing.
Okay. I think it's more complicated mechanics to implement.
And we got enough problems or stuff on our plate as it is, so we want to take one at a time, make sure everything we do has quality. That we think is for the best. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I think where the funds and liquidity are at stake, it's required to take as much attention as possible. So it's a good approach to take.
Yeah.
And what about the future of Mystic? What are the key milestones for the next, let's say, 6 months? I would not say more, because it's so hard to predict technological future. So I would say 6 would be good.
Yeah, 6 months is already like eternity in crypto. I can only even give you through 6 weeks or 6 days, I think. No, I'm joking. Yeah, so we really see 3 moments to Mystic, and 3 things we do. So one is to really focus on solving for our value prop and doing as best we can the Plume ecosystem. Again, we're very bullish on them and we like working with them. So we want to, I guess, do good for the ecosystem. And that is also where we want to see the RFQ API function and solve the problem we just described of onboarding RWAs. If we can grow the lending market on Plume, theoretically, these primitives work, right? Both the API and the structured vaults. Structured vaults enable more, I would say, interesting markets to be made in the form of, again, structured credit facilities and junior tranche for more liquid assets. So it is also a great playground to test that. What's really cool about what we're doing is that it scales very well beyond Plume to RWAs and crypto. The API is just a more slow and steady wins the race kind of thinking, where we slowly onboard more assets and more liquidators, and the more we go, the stronger the product is, because it is a network at the end of the day, right? And so it will definitely, in my eyes, reach a critical mass of, now it makes sense for any new liquidator and any new asset to join and see what deals are there, basically. So over the next 6 months, it's definitely focus on Plume, prove these two work, take the API to new asset issuers, new liquidators, regardless of the chain. I think the API is very chain agnostic in that regard. And then growth structuring on Morpho. And I think that's definitely like enough problems for a 6-month horizon. Should it work, we'll look outwards, right? Because we're not going to stop having RWA issuers coming on chain. We internally think structuring has the potential to do a lot more in DeFi than just what I just said. So we think that primitive can go a really, really long way. We can work with a lot of protocols we can take structuring to DeFi. And so that's how we're going about it.
Perfect. I think that a strategy to win over on a Plume chain and then to expand over other chains is really valid. And with the features that you're planning to roll out soon, I think it's more than possible. So wish you luck on that. Yeah, overall, thank you so much for elaborating on this aspects. It was really insightful. For everyone who is interested to see what's Mystic going to be building up in the near future, you can join on the socials. Going to be all the links going to be posted below, and subscribe to the Token Podcast to see more insightful episode about tokenization and DeFi. So thank you, Joao. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Max. Thanks for listening. See you.